Hi, welcome to this video about Azure Key Vault and in particular secrets in Azure Key Vault. This video is part of the Azure Advent Calendar initiative by Pixel Robots and Gregor Suttie. If you haven't seen it already, check out the YouTube channel. There's loads of good content up there. Now, this is not going to be PowerPoint, I promise, but I just need to introduce a couple of contents before we get on to the code. One of the things about Azure Key Vault is that it's not well understood what it is, what it does, and how to use it, and the documentation isn't always all that helpful in explaining it. So before I start, let me just explain. Azure Key Vault really does a few things that are quite separate in many ways. Firstly, it provides a place to store secrets in a safe way, so like passwords and those kind of things. Store them in a place where people can't get to them and read them and so on, and I'll explain what that means in a second. Very separately from that, Key Vault also has functionality around keys and cryptography, and it has particular about public-private key encryption, and has some very clever functionality on there that I shall be covering in a future video. And then it has a third functionality, which is it's a certificate store, just like you have in Windows and on Mac OS and Linux and so on. A place to store X509 certificates. So if you're running your own web server that you need an SSL certificate for, or you need X509 certificates for client-side authentication and those kind of things, you might know that putting them inside of your web app in Azure can be quite challenging. There are ways to do it, but it's not the easiest thing in the world, and putting them in the certificate store is the safe and easy way to do that. And then the fourth piece of functionality is it has some functionality around storage accounts and automatically changing the keys for storage accounts. It's really just a convenient wrapper over the secrets bit in reality, and Microsoft are sort of recommending you don't really use it because these days you should use service principals or managed identity for accessing your storage account. So it's really secrets, keys, cryptography, and the certificate store. Alright, so talking about secrets, firstly, we all have a need to store secrets in our code, whether it's passwords or whatever, and there's a few different ways we do it. Traditionally, you can put it in the source. Should really get you fired in this day and age. You can put it in your web config, app config, various other configuration files, app settings.json, or other things. But if you do that, you really should encrypt them, and then you need to have a key for that, and it gets really complicated really quickly, and you're still not really sure that you can protect it from people seeing it. You can put it in Azure App Settings. That's a very common thing to do, but then you have to think about who in your ops team or who in your dev team or whoever actually has the access to go into the Azure portal and read those settings, and anybody who can read them can use them, and then you don't really have the security and the auditing you need. Another common thing to do is put it in your CD pipeline, but then you still have to think about still has to write it to somewhere, whether that's into your web config or into your Azure App Settings. Again, it can be done in a safe way, can be complicated, it might be the right thing. What Azure Key Vault does, it is just really a key value store. You can have a key, here's the value for it, so you can say this is my secret password, and the secret password is, oh, it's so secret. But it has other things like you have very fine-grained access control. You can control, so for example, you might say there's only one person or even a computer that can auto-generate them, that can write the keys, and there might be an app that can only read them. So even if a human has to input the keys, you can actually make it so they can't read them and those kind of things. You can do authentication to Key Vault extremely easily with managed identity, and I will in this video show you how to set that up. In my example, it's ASP.NET Core, but it will work with pretty much any other programming language and framework out there. Another thing that's really helpful with Azure Key Vault is that you can store multiple versions of the key. So let's say you have a password that needs to change every so often. You can put future versions into Key Vault and say, oh, that thing will should only be used from tomorrow, for example. But you do need to bear in mind that Key Vault will not respect those dates. It will just allow you to retrieve them, and it's up to you to use the date. If you do use the keys in Key Vault for cryptography, you should understand that that is completely different between keys and secrets. In keys, those dates are absolutely respected by Key Vault, whereas in secrets they're not. Okay, enough of all of this nonsense, and let's go and look at some code. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a simple little key vault. We're going to create a key vault, and then we're going to store it, and I'm going to do all of this using the Azure CLI because it's just faster and easier and more fun. So I'm just going to set a few defaults to make my life easier, so I'm just going to set that so I don't have to keep typing where things are. I'm just going to create a group, so AC group create, that's this name, if I'll just test dash key vault. And then we're going to create a key vault. It really is as simple as saying AC key vault, and this is the Azure CLI if that wasn't obvious. If you don't use it already, please do use it. It makes life so much easier for you. And we're going to do this and create the key vault, and that does take a little while. So we're just going to do some magic time traveling now. Okay, in the real world that took a fair bit longer than that, maybe 20-30 seconds. Now, in order to use key vault, is by default I can't really do anything, so I'm going to give myself some permissions around secrets. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do AC key vault set policy, and then I'm going to do I'm going to say it's for the FL test key vault. I'm going to do it for a UPN, which is me, and that's what you do for real world users. When you do it for a service principal, you use a different syntax, which I will show you later. And I'm going to give myself some secret permissions, and there's other kinds of permissions like keys and other things. And I'm going to give myself get, which means I can read a key. I'm going to give myself the ability to list keys, and I'm going to give myself the permission to set keys, which means create or write keys. I'm going to run that, and that's done. Now, finally, I'm going to now create a secret, and I'm going to do a basic one. So I'm going to do AC Key Vault. Again, you can do this in code, you can do it in the portal. There's a very nice UI for this, but I'm just going to do it here because it's nice and easy. The name of the I'm going to call it super secret password because that's really secret. It's for the Vault FL test, and the value is going to be, oh my word, it's so secret. And then I've set that secret. That's really how simple that is. Now, what I'm going to do now is just create a little console app that we can use to read the secret. Again, you can read them in the portal if you have to write. You can read them on the console in the Azure CLI. But we're just going to write a bit of C# code for this. Again, you can do this in pretty much any language. It's very easy to do. So we're going to do .NET new console -n key vault show. Sorry. Secret. So there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a couple of packages to this very quickly. These are the only two packages you need to talk to Key Vault, and I will explain what they do in a minute. So these two packages. And then let's look at some code. Now, so what we have here is something simple. I'm just going to add a couple of quick variables to it so we can access things. And then in best Blue Peter style, I have prepared a little bit of code here. So we're just going to have a look at this. Now, let me just explain this. So Azure Service Token Provider is a very, very clever little construct. What it does is it will use my locally logged in thing that I've logged in with in Visual Code, Visual Studio Code, or in the Azure CLI to log into Azure. So when I'm running locally, I'll log in as me. If I'm running in Azure, it will automatically look for a managed identity, and then it will use that instead. So the same code can run locally and use my identity and run in Azure running using a managed service identity. If you don't know what a managed service identity is, it's a really clever thing where on things like web apps and VMs and various other things, Microsoft will essentially give you a service principal that can only and automatically be accessed from code running on that web app or that VM. And that means you don't have to worry about, oh hang on, where do I store the password for the Key Vault? Because you don't need a password for the Key Vault. The access is controlled by the fact that where the code is running, and that makes things a lot easier. There is a newer version that was released in November 2019 of that. This called default default Azure principal, something like that, and that default token provider. That one, unfortunately, doesn't currently work with the Azure CLI, so I'm using the slightly older version here, but the principles are exactly the same. So that's going to give us basically access to Azure. And then we're going to create a Key Vault client here, and again the syntax is a little bit circumspect, but it's basically saying create a Key Vault client and then you pass it in a callback which is from that thing, and that just means whenever this Key Vault client needs to access something in Azure, it will go and ask that thing for your login, and if you're running locally it'll be you, and if you're running in Azure it'll be your managed identity. And then finally, I'm just going to ask for the Key Vault client, ask for get secret async, pass it in the URL of my Key Vault, and the name of my secret, which is super secret password. So in this version of the SDK, what you find is that the Key Vault client is a generic Key Vault client that can be used for any Key Vault, and then when you call it, you pass in the URL. Whereas in the newer version, when you create the Key Vault client, you specify the URL for the Key Vault that you want to talk to, and that's probably a better design, to be honest, but this works and you will see. So let's try and run that. And there we go, we read the key, we read the secret here, it's right down here, and that really is all there is to it. That's how simple it is. You might wonder, what's all the fuss about? Well, it's just that it is now stored in a place where you have complete control over who can read it, and all access to it is audited and logged, so that you can, rather than just sitting in your app settings in Azure or in some web config file that anybody can read. Now there's a few more tricks you can use, so let me just show you a few other things. So firstly, we can look at creating a new version of the secret. So if I just clear that, and then what we can do is we can add, so here's one I prepared earlier. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So this is a little bit more, I have a few more things on this one. So I'm saying, okay, all I do is it's the same command I call set, and then I just tell it which one it is. I give it a new value, and now I've specified my not before and when it expires, and I've also specified this disabled parameter. Now, as I mentioned before, not before and expires, they're just there for your convenience. So you'll find out I'm saying this one is not to be used before Christmas. Don't open before Christmas. But you'll see in a minute that when I actually call the ask Key Vault for the latest version, I will actually get this new value back. Now, disabled faults, disable is interesting. If you do disable a secret, then Key Vault will throw an exception if you try to read it. So that can be quite useful for certain scenarios if you want to actively stop a certain password or secret being used. So now if I do that, and then you'll see if I run my code again, then we will actually get Oxford now, even though it was don't open before Christmas. As you see, that returns Oxford. So you might ask, so what's the point of having those dates on there? So if we change the program a bit, I'll show you a little slightly different version here that will list all of the versions, and then so you can do something like this in your code. So what this will do is it's basically the same thing, but then we'll ask for all of the versions of that secret, and then we're going to loop through each one and print out the information we have about them. So now if we run this code, so what you can see is we're saying we get we have two versions. This is the original version, and that has just it's still enabled, and this is the value of it. And then we have a new version here, and that also has some to and from dates and the value. So what the point is that if you are wanting to use these dates, you can basically use this kind of code to retrieve these things into memory and then decide when to switch over, so you can have your code handling it, that kind of thing. And that's really all there is to the console. So what we're going to do now is have a look in ASP.NET Core. Right, so for the purpose of this, we're just going to quickly create a new ASP.NET Core app. So we're going to do .NET new MVC does name Azure Key Vault web. So in this case we actually need 3 NuGet packages. Again, these are all listed on the blog that comes along with this video, but here we go. So the last one is Microsoft Extensions Configuration Azure Key Vault. This one here, that's the one that does the magic of tying the two together. So again, let's have a look at this. So there's only really one thing we have to do. This is where the integration to ASP.NET Core is particularly clever, I have to say. Okay, because we have this create default builder. This is ASP.NET Core 3. There's similar things for ASP.NET Core 2. But all we have to do is add a little bit, one simple statement that I have prepared. I'm just going to add it here. And that's really all there is to it. And so we're basically just saying configure, we're just adding Azure Key Vault to our configuration. What this will do is it will automatically, Azure Key Vault will, ASP.NET Core's configuration will add application startup, go over to the Key Vault, list all of the secrets you have stored in there and put them all into Azure Key Vault. Really, that's that simple. And it will use, again, locally it's going to use, because I'm using Azure Service Token Provider, it will use my credentials locally, and if I'm in Azure it will use managed identity. It's really that simple. So the simplest way I can show you this actually working is by doing some really horrible code in a view, but it does work. So let me just, this is just for demo purposes. Do not do this in the real world, please. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of injection like this. So what this allows me to do is inject iConfiguration into my view, and then I'm setting a variable here to, my password is get the configuration value super secret password. You can see this doesn't talk about Key Vault at all. This is just talking about the configuration settings, and you could tie this into an iOptions object and all of the rest of it, because it's just another value in your list of configuration options. And then we're just going to add a little bit of things that shows it. Here we go. Let's just do this so we can see what we're doing. There we go. And that's it. That's really all there is to it. And if I run this, if all goes well, we should be able to see our secret showing up. And of course what we get is our funny little thing here, but we'll move on to it. And we can see, here we go, retrieve from Key Vault, and the value is Oxford. That's the latest one. So you can see ASP.NET Core also doesn't care about those dates, and that makes sense because it would probably only be these at startup. So if you started looking at the dates, it would probably just be out of date. So again, even in ASP.NET Core, if you want to use the best before and expiry dates, you have to write that yourself, or you can change the key manager that you pass in, and change the setup. But that's really just the basic thing. Now the last thing I wanted to show you was how to then do this in Azure, just to prove that I wasn't lying about managed identity. In fairness, most of the rest of what I'm about to show you has more to do with Azure managed identity and stuff like that than it has to do with Azure Key Vault, but I thought it was interesting, so I've chalked it in here. You can stop watching now if you just wanted to know about the Key Vault bit. Okay. So what we're going to do is we just need to do a few things to deploy this up to Azure. The first thing we're going to do is just do some Git stuff, and we're going to do a Git ignore file, because otherwise we're going to have too much stuff. So we just need bin obj, and that's it. Close that down. So that's it. We're just gonna do git add -a, the usual stuff, and then there we go. So we have that set up. So what we now are going to quickly create a Azure app service plan, and then create a web app on that, and then deploy it to that. Now we're going to do this using Linux because as I'm writing this, I did my ASP.NET app in ASP.NET Core 3, and that is available on Linux today, but not on Windows. I'm sure that'll change shortly, but it is an interesting thing to note that Microsoft is making things available on Linux earlier than on Windows these days. Okay, that's that one set up. and then I'm going to create a web app now. This is one of those weird quirks. I run in the PowerShell shell, but actually this one command here won't run in that because PowerShell has a thing about characters that can't be escaped and stuff like that. So I'm just going to pop into a command prompt for this one thing. So what we're doing is basically it's this thing here, .NET Core 3, that pipe symbol PowerShell doesn't like. So I have to run this in the command line. But that's basically just telling Azure to set up a web app using the .NET Core 3 runtime and using local Git so I can push to it quickly. So that's all done. And then what we need to do, so we can go back to the comfort of the blue screen again. I really should learn Bash one of these days. Okay, now what we now need to do is enable managed identity on this particular web app. So that means we do AC web app identity assign that's this name FL test key vault. So the FS test key vault secrets, that's the name of my web app, and this basically says to Azure, look, and if I could spell, so this basically tells Azure that we want to have a managed identity associated with this particular web app. And here is and that gives me a principal ID, so I need this for the next command, so I'm just going to copy that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a set policy on my key vault like before. So AC key vault set policy, and I'm going to say that it's that key vault that I created before called FL test, and I'm going to say the object ID, because this is now the thing about this is a service principal, which is like a system user, this managed identity. I'm going to put that object ID in there, and I'm going to give it the permissions of get and list. Now it's important that you give it both get and list, because in order for the ASP.NET configuration engine to enumerate the secret, you need list, and then it needs get to read each secret. And if I do that, I will basically say my app, my FL test key vault web app, now has the rights to read these secrets in Azure, and I'm just going to show you that in the portal because that might make a little bit more sense. This is the FL test key vault, and now if I look at access policies, we can see that myself, a user, has it, and we can see there's this application here which is FL test key vault secrets, has got two secret permissions, get and list, and that really is all there is to it. It's very, very straightforward like that. Okay, get rid of that. Now let's just finish getting this deployed. So we need to use this cute little command here to find out a username and password for the we can use to deploy. I'm just going to copy all of this out because we're going to need the username and the password. Right, and then I'm going to do I'm just going to add a remote for Azure again like this. Then I'm going to just try and push that up to Azure, so just do this from the command line. So I'm just pushing my master branch up to my Azure remote. Because we're on Windows in this case, I'm going to get this thing up again. If depending on your setup, you might use an SSH token or various other ways. So we had this result before, so I'm going to get my publishing username here. So this is unique for just this web app, and this secret here that you can copy if you like, but it's only valid for this web app, and I'm going to delete this web app as soon as I've finished recording this video. Do that. So in the real world that deploy took about a minute, so I've just edited it down so you didn't have to sit through what I had to sit through. Now finally we can then see whether that all worked. So let's have a look. So if we do AC Web App Browse, that's really is the height of laziness, but so that is now running in Azure. You see that up here, and it has read this from Key Vault. And again, if you remember, I haven't given it a login for the Key Vault or anything else. I've just there's no password for the Key Vault being stored in any configuration setting anywhere. This is just a managed identity reading Key Vault, and that's it. Right, thanks for watching. If you want to know anything more about what we do at Njorbit, then go to njorbit.co.uk. If you want to read any more of my ramblings or see any more of my videos, mainly about security and Azure, then go to Lytzen.name or hit me on Twitter at Lytzen. Also, have a look at all of the other nice content from the Azure Advent Calendar. It's been a real pleasure and real opportunity, so thanks to all the people behind that. Thank you.